The man who would build one of the world's greatest automotive empires was once rejected by Toyota, failed spectacularly at making piston rings, and had to sell his wife's jewelry to keep his dream alive. This is the story of Soichiro Honda, a blacksmith's son who became one of the greatest automotive engineers in history, proving that formal education matters far less than relentless curiosity and the courage to fail spectacularly. Our story begins on November 17, 1906, in a small village called Komio, in the Shizuoka prefecture of Japan. Soichiro was born into a poor family. His father, Gihei Honda, was a blacksmith who also repaired bicycles to make ends meet. His mother, Mika, helped with the family business while raising Soichiro and his siblings. There was no wealth, no privilege, no indication that this child would transform global manufacturing. Young Soichiro grew up in his father's workshop, surrounded by tools, metal, and the smell of oil and iron. While other children played traditional games, Soichiro was fascinated by how things worked. He would take apart anything he could get his hands on: clocks, bicycles, farm equipment driven by an insatiable need to understand mechanisms and motion. His father's blacksmith shop was Soichiro's first classroom, far more influential than any school would be. He learned to work metal, to understand stress and strength, to see how parts fit together to create function. These weren't academic lessons. They were practical, physical understanding that came from working with his hands. Formal education held little interest for young Soichiro. He attended school because he had to, but his mind was always elsewhere, thinking about machines and motion. He was a poor student by conventional measures, uninterested in memorization or traditional learning. His teachers saw a distracted, unexceptional boy. They had no idea they were looking at a future engineering genius. When Soichiro was 8 years old, something happened that would change his life forever. An automobile came through his village. This was 1914, and cars were extraordinarily rare in rural Japan. Most people had never seen one. The entire village turned out to watch this mechanical marvel pass through. Soichiro was transfixed. The sound, the smell of gasoline and oil, the idea that this machine could move under its own power, it captured his imagination completely. He chased the car down the road, running until he couldn't run anymore, just to watch it move. When it was gone, he stood in the road smelling the oil it had dripped, trying to hold onto the experience. From that moment, Soichiro knew what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to build machines that moved. He wanted to understand engines, to create vehicles, to bring this incredible technology to the world. The direction of his life was set by a brief encounter with an automobile in a dusty village road. At age 15, Soichiro left his village for Tokyo. He had no advanced education, no special credentials, just burning desire and a recommendation letter from a teacher who recognized his mechanical aptitude. He found work at Art Shokai, an automobile service and repair shop. His official title was apprentice, but his actual job was closer to servant. He cleaned, ran errands, took care of the owner's baby, and did menial tasks. For over a year, he wasn't allowed to touch the cars. He just watched, learned, absorbed everything he could about how automobiles worked and how they were repaired. But Soichiro was patient. He knew this was his education, more valuable than any school. He watched the mechanics work, studied how they diagnosed problems, learned which tools did what. He asked questions constantly, annoying some of the senior mechanics but impressing others with his genuine curiosity. Finally, he got his chance. When the shop became extremely busy, desperate for help, they let Soichiro actually work on cars. He was a natural. His hands, trained in his father's blacksmith shop, were skilled with tools. His mind, trained by years of taking things apart and putting them back together, understood mechanical systems intuitively. Soichiro thrived in the repair shop. He became one of their best mechanics, known for his ability to diagnose difficult problems and his willingness to work on anything, no matter how challenging. But he wasn't content just fixing other people's machines. He wanted to build his own. In 1922, at age 16, Soichiro had his first experience with racing. Art Shokai was asked to prepare a car for a race, and Soichiro worked on it obsessively, tuning the engine, adjusting everything for maximum performance. Then, when the driver backed out at the last minute, Soichiro drove the car himself. He crashed spectacularly. The car was destroyed, and Soichiro was injured, though not seriously. But he loved every minute of it. The speed, the challenge of controlling a machine at its limits, the engineering problems revealed by racing, all of it fascinated him. Racing would remain a passion throughout his life, both as sport and as engineering laboratory. By 1928, Soichiro had learned everything he could at Art Shokai. The owner, recognizing Soichiro's abilities, helped him open a branch of the shop in Hamatsu, back near Soichiro's home village. At age 22, Soichiro was running his own business, repairing cars and building a reputation as an exceptional mechanic. But Soichiro wanted more than a repair business. He wanted to manufacture parts, to create something rather than just fix what others made. He became particularly interested in piston rings, the critical engine components that seal the cylinder and allow efficient combustion. Making good piston rings required precision manufacturing and metallurgy knowledge. Soichiro had neither the equipment nor the expertise, but he was undeterred. He began experimenting, trying different materials and techniques, failing repeatedly but learning from each failure. In 1937, Soichiro started Tokai Seiki to manufacture piston rings. He was convinced he could make better rings than anyone else. He worked obsessively, sometimes sleeping in the factory, driven by his vision of creating the perfect product. There was just one problem: his piston rings didn't work very well. They were inconsistent quality, prone to failure, not up to the standards of major manufacturers. Soichiro approached Toyota, hoping to become a supplier. Toyota tested his rings and rejected them. The rings didn't meet their specifications. This rejection could have ended Soichiro's manufacturing dreams. Many people would have given up, gone back to running a repair shop, accepted that they weren't cut out for manufacturing. Soichiro did something different. He went back to school. At age 31, a successful business owner, Soichiro enrolled in engineering courses at the Hamamatsu School of Technology. He didn't pursue a degree, he had no interest in credentials. He just wanted to learn the metallurgy and manufacturing processes he needed to make better piston rings. His classmates were teenagers. His teachers were younger than him. He didn't care. He needed knowledge, and he was willing to humble himself to get it. He attended lectures, studied material science, learned the theory behind what he'd been trying to do through intuition and experimentation. The combination of practical experience and theoretical knowledge transformed Soichiro's work. He improved his manufacturing processes, refined his techniques, and eventually produced piston rings that met Toyota's standards. He became a supplier, and Tokai Seiki grew into a successful business with hundreds of employees. Then came World War II. The Japanese government took control of Tokai Seiki, using it for war production. Soichiro lost effective control of his company. Then, in 1945, American bombing destroyed the factory. Everything he'd built over 8 years was gone. Most people would have been devastated. Soichiro saw it as liberation. He'd been making piston rings because they were profitable, but his heart had never been fully in it. With the factory destroyed and Japan in ruins, he was free to pursue what he really loved: building complete machines. Post-war Japan was desperate for transportation. The trains were destroyed, gasoline was scarce, and people needed ways to get around. Soichiro had an idea: attach small engines to bicycles. It was simple, practical, and addressed a real need. He bought surplus military generator engines, tiny two-stroke engines that had powered radio generators during the war. He modified them to attach to bicycles, creating motorized bicycles that could travel 50 miles on a single bottle of fuel. They were crude but effective, and they sold immediately. Soichiro called his contraption the Bata Bata because of the puttering sound it made. It was barely a motorcycle really, just a bicycle with a tiny engine strapped on. But it worked, people wanted it, and Soichiro was in business again. When the surplus engines ran out, Soichiro did what he did best. He designed and built his own. The A-type engine, completed in 1947, was Soichiro's first original engine design for a motorized bicycle. It was more sophisticated than the military surplus engines, more efficient, and more reliable. In 1948, Soichiro founded Honda Motor Company. He was 42 years old, starting over after losing his previous business, with no certainty of success. But he had a vision. He wanted to build the best small engines in the world. The early Honda motorcycles were basic transportation machines. They weren't glamorous or exciting. They were practical, affordable, and reliable. But Soichiro was always pushing for improvement, always thinking about how to make them better, faster, more efficient. In 1949, Honda released the Dream D-Type, the company's first real motorcycle rather than a motorized bicycle. It had a 98 cubic centimeters engine, produced 3 horsepower, and could reach speeds of 50 miles per hour. It was a genuine motorcycle, and it established Honda as a serious manufacturer. But Soichiro wasn't content with the Japanese market. From the beginning, he dreamed of competing internationally. He believed Honda could build motorcycles that would compete with the best European manufacturers. Many people thought he was delusional. Japanese products had a reputation for being cheap and low quality. The idea of a Japanese motorcycle competing with British or Italian bikes seemed absurd. Soichiro didn't care what people thought was possible. He cared what was actually possible, and he believed engineering excellence could overcome any prejudice. In 1954, he made a bold declaration: "We will compete in the Isle of Man TT races and win." The Isle of Man TT was the most prestigious motorcycle race in the world, held on a treacherous 37-mile mountain course on the Isle of Man, a small island between England and Ireland. The race had been dominated by European manufacturers for decades. No Japanese company had ever competed, much less won. Soichiro's engineers thought he was crazy. They didn't have bikes that could compete at that level. They didn't have the technology, the experience, or the expertise. But Soichiro was determined. If Honda couldn't compete at the highest level, it would never be taken seriously internationally. Honda spent 5 years developing racing motorcycles specifically for the Isle of Man TT. They studied European bikes, sent engineers to watch races, and pushed their technology to the limit. In 1959, Honda entered the race for the first time. They didn't win, but they finished, and they learned. In 1961, Honda won their first Isle of Man TT race in the 125 cubic centimeters class. Then they won the 250 cubic centimeters class. By the mid-1960s, Honda was dominant, winning multiple classes year after year. The Japanese company that nobody took seriously had become a racing powerhouse. But racing was never just about trophies for Soichiro. It was about proving technology, about pushing engineering to its limits, about learning things that could improve all Honda products. "Racing is my laboratory," he said. What Honda learned on the racetrack made their production motorcycles better. In 1958, Honda released the Super Cub, perhaps the most important product in the company's history. The Super Cub was a small, step-through motorcycle with a 50 cubic centimeters engine. It was easy to ride, economical, reliable, and affordable. It looked friendly and approachable, not intimidating like larger motorcycles. The Super Cub was revolutionary in ways that weren't immediately obvious. It wasn't the fastest or most powerful motorcycle. It was something better. It was a motorcycle anyone could ride, including women, including people who'd never ridden before, including people who needed practical transportation more than excitement. Honda's advertising for the Super Cub in America became legendary: "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." This slogan deliberately countered the image of motorcyclists as rebellious outcasts. Honda was saying that motorcycles weren't just for rebels and outlaws. They were for everyone, for teachers, for postal workers, for families. The campaign worked brilliantly. Honda sold millions of Super Cubs, transforming the motorcycle market and proving that Japanese manufacturers could create products that appealed to mainstream consumers worldwide. The Super Cub became the best-selling motor vehicle in history, with over 100 million units sold across decades. But Soichiro's ambitions extended beyond motorcycles. He wanted to build automobiles. In the early 1960s, this seemed like an impossible dream. The global automobile industry was dominated by American, European, and established Japanese manufacturers. Toyota and Nissan were already major players. What chance did a motorcycle company have? The Japanese government thought Honda's automotive ambitions were foolish and potentially harmful. They wanted to consolidate the Japanese auto industry around a few strong companies that could compete internationally. They actively discouraged Honda from entering the automobile business. Soichiro ignored them. He didn't ask permission from the government or anyone else. If Honda could build great motorcycles, it could build great cars. The engineering principles were the same. The commitment to quality was the same. The willingness to learn from failure was the same. In 1963, Honda released its first production automobile, the T360 mini truck, followed quickly by the S500 sports car. These weren't revolutionary vehicles, but they were competent, well-engineered, and they established Honda in the automotive market. But Soichiro's real genius emerged in how Honda approached automobile engineering. The company focused on engines where Honda's motorcycle expertise gave them advantages. Honda engines were efficient, high-revving, and powerful for their size. These characteristics, developed for motorcycles and racing, translated beautifully to automobiles. In 1972, Honda released the Civic, a small, fuel-efficient car that arrived just as the 1973 oil crisis made fuel economy suddenly crucial. The Civic was perfectly timed for a market that desperately wanted economical transportation. But it was also genuinely good, well-engineered, reliable, and fun to drive. The Civic's timing was fortunate, but its excellence was not accidental. Soichiro had built a company culture that obsessed over engineering quality, that tested products to destruction, that refused to release anything that wasn't excellent. This culture produced cars that were reliable, efficient, and enjoyable. Honda also tackled emissions before regulations forced them to. In the early 1970s, the U.S. Clean Air Act established strict emissions standards that most manufacturers claimed were impossible to meet. Honda engineers developed the CVCC engine, which met the standards without catalytic converters, using clever engineering to reduce emissions through combustion chamber design. This achievement embarrassed American and European manufacturers who'd claimed the standards were technologically impossible. Honda, the upstart Japanese company, had solved a problem that established manufacturers said couldn't be solved. It was another example of Soichiro's fundamental belief: engineering problems always had solutions if you worked hard enough to find them. Soichiro's management philosophy was unconventional and reflected his personality. He despised bureaucracy, titles, and hierarchy. At Honda, everyone wore the same white uniform, from Soichiro to the newest factory worker. There were no reserved parking spaces for executives. Offices were open, and anyone could talk to anyone. He encouraged engineers to question everything, to try unconventional approaches, to learn from failures. Success represents the 1% of your work which results from the 99% that is called failure, he said. Honda employees were expected to fail repeatedly in pursuit of innovation. Soichiro would walk the factory floor, talking to workers, asking about problems, listening to ideas. He didn't believe in management by memo or hierarchy. He believed in direct communication, in understanding problems firsthand, in respecting the knowledge of people doing the actual work. He was also famous for his temper. When Soichiro saw something done poorly or carelessly, he would explode, sometimes throwing tools or parts. But his anger was never about punishment. It was about standards, about refusing to accept mediocrity when excellence was possible. Stories about Soichiro's unconventional behavior are legendary. He once threw a newly designed transmission out of a window because it didn't meet his standards, letting it shatter on the pavement below. He regularly bypassed corporate procedures, making decisions without consulting management committees because he thought bureaucracy slowed progress. This management style wouldn't work in many organizations. It worked at Honda because Soichiro had credibility. He wasn't some distant executive who didn't understand engineering. He was a master engineer who could diagnose problems, suggest solutions, and had proven his judgment through decades of success. In 1973, at age 67, Soichiro retired from Honda's day-to-day management, though he remained involved in technical matters as supreme advisor. The company he'd founded in 1948 with a handful of employees now had tens of thousands of workers and was selling motorcycles and automobiles worldwide. His retirement didn't mean withdrawal from engineering. Soichiro continued working on technical problems, experimenting with new ideas, and pushing boundaries. Engineering wasn't his job. It was his identity, his passion, his way of engaging with the world. One of Soichiro's great innovations was his partnership with Takeo Fujisawa, Honda's business manager and co-founder in many ways. Soichiro focused on engineering and product development. Fujisawa handled business operations, finance, and strategy. They complemented each other perfectly. Soichiro, the passionate engineer, Fujisawa, the pragmatic businessman. This partnership was crucial to Honda's success. Soichiro's engineering genius created great products, but Fujisawa's business acumen ensured the company could survive, grow, and compete effectively. Many brilliant engineers fail as business people. Soichiro succeeded because he found a partner who handled what he couldn't or wouldn't do. The relationship wasn't always smooth. Soichiro and Fujisawa argued, disagreed, and challenged each other constantly. But they shared fundamental values: commitment to quality, respect for employees, and belief that Honda should compete through excellence rather than cost-cutting or shortcuts. When both men retired in 1973, they established a principle that would shape Honda's future: no family members would work at Honda in senior positions. This was extraordinary. Most founders try to establish dynasties, keeping control within their families. Soichiro deliberately prevented this, believing the company should be led by the most capable people, regardless of family connections. This decision reflected Soichiro's fundamental beliefs about merit and ability. He'd succeeded despite lacking formal education or family connections. He'd been rejected by Toyota, failed at his first manufacturing business, and built success through persistence, learning, and excellence. He wanted Honda to embody these values, not become a family dynasty. Soichiro's personal life was relatively simple despite his business success. He remained married to Sachi, his wife of many decades, who had supported him through the failed piston ring business, the war years, and the difficult early days of Honda. He credited her with making his work possible, acknowledging that she'd sacrificed and supported him when there was little reason for confidence. He maintained interests beyond engineering. Soichiro loved art, particularly painting, and spent time creating artwork in his later years. He appreciated beauty and craftsmanship in many forms, not just mechanical engineering. This aesthetic sensibility influenced Honda's design philosophy: products should be beautiful as well as functional. Soichiro also remained connected to his roots. He never forgot his origins as a blacksmith's son, never pretended to be something he wasn't. He spoke plainly, often crudely, using the language of workshops rather than boardrooms. This authenticity was part of his appeal and his effectiveness as a leader. In his later years, Soichiro received numerous honors. He was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, received the Order of the Rising Sun from the Japanese government, and was recognized globally as one of the great industrialists of the 20th century. But awards never interested him much. Engineering problems interested him. Making things better interested him. Recognition was pleasant but peripheral. Soichiro Honda died on August 5, 1991, at age 84. The company he founded continued thriving, becoming one of the world's largest automobile manufacturers, producing some of the most reliable and innovative vehicles in the industry. Honda's reputation for engineering excellence, for quality, for innovation, all of it traces back to principles Soichiro established. His legacy extends beyond Honda specifically. Soichiro demonstrated that formal education, while valuable, isn't necessary for engineering genius. He proved that Japanese manufacturing could compete with and surpass Western companies at their own game. He showed that technical excellence, not just low costs, could be the foundation of global success. The path from blacksmith's son to global industrialist wasn't smooth or predictable. Soichiro failed repeatedly. He was rejected by Toyota. His first manufacturing business was destroyed. He started over at 42 with motorized bicycles. But each failure taught him something, and he was humble enough to learn. His willingness to go back to school at 31, to study alongside teenagers, to admit he didn't know what he needed to know, this humility combined with fierce determination made him special. He was confident in his abilities but not so arrogant that he couldn't recognize gaps in his knowledge. The Super Cub, selling over 100 million units, changed transportation for hundreds of millions of people. The Civic and Accord became synonymous with reliable, efficient automobiles. Honda's racing success proved Japanese engineering could compete at the highest levels. The CVCC engine showed Japanese innovation could solve problems Western manufacturers claimed were unsolvable. But perhaps Soichiro's greatest legacy is cultural. He created a company that valued engineers, that encouraged innovation, that tolerated failure in pursuit of excellence. At a time when Japanese industry was known for copying Western technology, Honda became known for innovation. This shift didn't happen by accident. It happened because Soichiro built a culture that rewarded creative problem-solving. The principle that everyone wore the same uniform, that titles mattered less than ideas, that hierarchy shouldn't block communication. These weren't just feel-good policies. They were practical strategies for making better products. Good ideas could come from anywhere if people felt empowered to share them. Soichiro's temper, his willingness to throw parts out windows, his explosive reactions to poor work, these might seem like flaws. But they reflected genuine passion for excellence. He couldn't tolerate mediocrity not because he was mean but because he believed products should be as good as humanly possible. This standard drove Honda's reputation for quality. His relationship with racing illuminated his philosophy. Honda spent enormous resources on racing, far more than could be justified by direct commercial returns. But racing pushed technology, revealed weaknesses, and created innovations that improved all products. The investment paid off not in trophy cases but in better engines, better designs, better engineering throughout the company. The decision to enter automobile manufacturing despite government opposition showed Soichiro's independence and confidence. He didn't need permission from authorities or validation from establishment. If Honda's engineers could build great motorcycles, they could build great cars. The skills and values transferred across product categories. When established manufacturers claimed emission standards were impossible, Honda proved them wrong. When people said Japanese products couldn't match Western quality, Honda exceeded Western quality. When critics said a motorcycle company couldn't succeed in automobiles, Honda became one of the world's leading auto manufacturers. These weren't victories through luck or timing alone. They were victories through engineering excellence, through obsessive attention to quality, through willingness to learn from anyone and everyone. Soichiro built an organization that embodied his values and perpetuated them beyond his personal involvement. The contrast with other automotive founders is illuminating. Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing but built a company that stagnated after his death. Enzo Ferrari created legendary sports cars but ran a company plagued by internal conflicts. Kiichiro Toyota built a great company but within relatively conventional corporate structures. Soichiro built something different, a company that innovated consistently, that maintained engineering excellence across decades, that competed successfully in multiple categories, and that perpetuated its founder's values long after his retirement. This durability of culture and values is perhaps his greatest achievement. As we consider Soichiro Honda's life from our current perspective, several themes emerge. First, the importance of passion over credentials. Soichiro's formal education was minimal, but his passion for engineering drove him to learn constantly, to experiment endlessly, to push boundaries relentlessly. Second, the value of failure as education. Soichiro failed repeatedly: piston rings, war destruction, early racing attempts. Each failure taught lessons that informed later success. He didn't hide from failure or pretend it hadn't happened. He studied it, learned from it, and moved forward. Third, the power of obsessive focus on quality. Honda's reputation wasn't built on marketing or cost advantages. It was built on products that worked brilliantly, that were reliable, that solved real problems elegantly. This commitment to quality created loyalty and reputation that no amount of advertising could buy. Fourth, the importance of respecting workers and engineers. Soichiro's egalitarian culture, his willingness to listen to anyone with good ideas, his rejection of hierarchical barriers, these created an organization where innovation could emerge from anywhere. Finally, the significance of independence and courage. Soichiro didn't follow conventional paths or seek approval from authorities. He pursued his vision despite rejection, despite government opposition, despite skeptics claiming Japanese products couldn't compete internationally. From a village blacksmith shop to global manufacturing empire, from motorized bicycles to world-class automobiles, from rejected supplier to industry leader, Soichiro Honda's journey embodies the possibility of transformation through persistence, learning, and excellence. The boy who chased a car down a dusty road became the man whose company built hundreds of millions of vehicles. The failed piston ring manufacturer became the founder of one of the world's most innovative companies. The autodidact who taught himself engineering became one of the greatest automotive engineers in history. His story resonates because it's fundamentally hopeful. Formal education isn't destiny. Early failures aren't final. Rejection isn't permanent. If you're willing to learn, to fail, to persist, to obsess over excellence, you can accomplish things that seem impossible. The Honda motorcycles and automobiles on roads worldwide, the racing victories that prove Japanese engineering excellence, the company culture that values innovation and quality, the inspiration provided to engineers and entrepreneurs globally, all of this is Soichiro Honda's legacy, built from curiosity, determination, and an unshakable belief that great engineering could change the world. And perhaps most remarkably, he did it all while remaining fundamentally himself, the blacksmith's son who loved machines, who couldn't tolerate mediocrity, who believed in learning from anyone, and who proved that passion and persistence could overcome any obstacle, even rejection by Toyota.